Friends, in 2002, the singer Norah Jones released a song called Come Away With Me. The words, come away with me in the night. Come away with me and I will write you a song. Come away with me on a bus. Come away where they can't tempt us with their lies. And I want to walk with you on a cloudy day in fields where the yellow grass grows knee-high. So won't you try to come? Come away with me. In our gospel passage today, from Mark chapter 6, the context is different, but Jesus' words to his disciples in verse 31 echo the words of Norah Jones, or perhaps it should be said it is the other way around. Norah Jones' words echo the words of Jesus. Words to his disciples, come away with me and rest a while. There are words that help to emphasize how important it is that we should make time to rest and recharge our batteries. Jesus' invitation to the disciples comes straight after two significant passages in Mark's Gospel. Firstly, it comes after the passage where Jesus sends out the 12, which we looked at last week. And secondly, it comes after the news that John the Baptist has been beheaded. In response to the disciples' missionary journey, Jesus points out the need for them to rest and to be recharged. Jesus is in touch with their humanity as well as his own. He's not a slave driver. He's concerned about their well-being. He knows that it's not possible to keep on keeping on without a break. He's in tune with the rhythm of life. There is a time for work and a time for rest. There's a time to be engaged with the world, and there is a time to retreat from the world. There is a time to come away. Even computers need to defrag once in a while, and if we never take our cars out for a service, they no longer run efficiently. And this is even true of Jesus. In this passage, we encounter something of Jesus' own humanity. He has just received the news of the death of his cousin, John the Baptist. And Jesus needs to take time out in order to sit with this pain, to sit with his grief. It's a reminder that grief is not something we can escape. The only way out is through. A hospice nurse once said that grieving is like digging through a mountain with a teaspoon, and there are no shortcuts to the other side of the mountain. And so Jesus draws aside to sit with his pain and the grief and the loss of his cousin. He doesn't try to avoid it. It's a reminder that we too have inner work that we all need to do that cannot be avoided. Secondly, we see that even with Jesus, his plans can go awry. While Jesus is making plans to get away, the crowds are making plans to find Jesus. In verse 32 and 33, we read that Jesus and the disciples left by a boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. But many people recognized them and saw them leaving. And people from many towns ran ahead of them along the shore and got there ahead of them. It all sounds a little bit like the paparazzi. Imagine wanting to get away for the weekend. And when you arrive at your destination, your clients are waiting for you in the hotel lobby. Jesus' response is, however, quite remarkable and reveals that there is something remarkable about him. It reveals his enormous capacity for compassion. We read in verse 34 that when Jesus saw the huge crowd, as he stepped from the boat, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. The Greek word in the passage for compassion refers to being moved in one's gut. It's one of those words that's difficult to pronounce in English. The Hebrew word for compassion that Jesus would have been more familiar with probably is taken from the root word rechem, which means womb. And both words, the Greek and the Hebrew, suggest that Jesus is moved and touched in the depth of his being. There is a maternal instinct in Jesus. It is as though Jesus considers each of those in the crowd as though they were his own offspring, his own dear children. They are part of the circle of Jesus' love. Though most of us might have been tempted to tell the crowds off and to send them away, Jesus reaches out to them in love and in compassion. There were plenty of other religious teachers, like the Pharisees, who told the crowds that they were unclean and not good enough for God. Jesus, however, expresses God's heart of love, where all are embraced and included. And he's particularly concerned about them because he describes them as being like sheep without a shepherd. This is a phrase that can be found in multiple places in the Old Testament and refers to the failure of the true leadership in Israel. The leaders of Israel, both secular and religious, care for themselves more than for the well-being of the people. And in response to this failure in Israel's leaders, Jesus steps in to respond with compassion, as a true shepherd of the people should. Getting back to the theme of rest, this passage beautifully illustrates the need for balance in our lives, the balance between self-care and selfless service. Jesus acknowledges the disciples' need for rest, together with his own need for rest, and he makes an intentional effort to withdraw from the demands of their ministry. This moment highlights the importance of recognizing our limitations and the necessity of taking time to recharge and to renew our spirits. And yet, when faced with the pressing needs of the crowd, Jesus is moved by compassion. He doesn't ignore their plight. Instead, he responds with love. This response shows that while self-care is crucial, there are times when compassion calls us to go beyond our comfort and our convenience in order to serve others. How do we find this balance in our own lives? In a world that often glorifies busyness and productivity, it's easy to neglect self-care. We may feel guilty for taking time for ourselves, fearing that we are being selfish or lazy. However, this passage reminds us that rest is not a luxury, but a necessity. Just as Jesus called his disciples to rest, we too must heed the call to take care of our physical, our emotional, and our spiritual well-being. On the other hand, our call to serve and show compassion remains ever present. We live in a world where the needs are great and the cries for help are many. Our challenge is to learn how to respond to those needs without neglecting our own. What are some practical steps that we might take to help us achieve this kind of balance? First is to schedule regular times for rest. We all need to make rest a regular part of our routine, whether it's a daily quiet time, a weekly Sabbath, or using one's annual leave wisely. We all need to make sure that we don't run on empty, that we have enough fuel in our tank to respond with kindness and compassion to the needs of others and the responsibilities of life. Secondly, we need to listen to our bodies and our spirits, to pay attention to signs of fatigue, of stress and burnout, and to be honest with ourselves about our limits and to take necessary breaks. Thirdly, to set healthy boundaries. There's a time to say yes, but there's also a time for saying no. And fourthly, making time for silence, prayer, meditation. Jesus in the Gospels regularly makes time for prayer and stillness. He withdraws regularly, and his example should encourage us to engage in practices that enable us to remain centered and to connect with our inner selves and with the divine. Such prayer is not just about talking and using words. There's a time when our words need to come to an end, and we hear God's invitation simply to rest into the stillness of God's presence and love. And so when the demands of life are high and they weigh heavily on us, and when the needs and sufferings of others perhaps become an irritation and a burden to us, may we make time to rest so that we have enough spiritual fuel to respond to others with grace and compassion. May we respond to the invitation of Jesus, "Come away with me and rest a while." Amen.